What advice would you have for AT hikers if they encounter bears or hogs? How should they be acting? What should they do or not do?
They kind of get that prey instinct, that if you run away, you want to stand your ground. I hiked into a hostel or somewhere where I could get a pizza. I'd get one to eat for me, and then I'd buy an extra one, let it cool, and put it in a Ziploc bag, and then fold them over on themselves like a sandwich. And again, a couple of days in, 2 or 3 days in, I'd still be eating on pizza. And I'd eat that first because it was so heavy.
Mhm.
And people say, dude, where'd you get that pizza? Somebody
Yeah,
said, I'll give you $20 for a piece of that pizza. I
I
said, man, I wouldn't take $100 for this pizza out here in this wilderness. So I jumped in with this guy, and I want you to know he drove like a maniac.
mm.
And tires were squealing through the mountain curves and the hairpin turns. And I said, sir, can I tell you something? And he said, what? And I said, you are really scaring me with your driving. Well, that made him mad. He drove faster. And I was
Ooh.
like, ooh, this is getting spicy. Well, that made him mad.
To the show, everybody. Today I'll be speaking with Preacher. Preacher is a well-respected AT hiker who I had the pleasure of meeting on trail last year. During his through hike attempt last year, he ended up contracting Lyme disease, and also injured himself. And I think that was in Pennsylvania. And although he ended up doing about 1,700 miles of the trail, he eventually made the decision to get off trail and end his hike for last year. This year, he's going to be back out there. And Preacher, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your 2025 through hike attempt and what happened with you?
Yes, I started on March the 1st, and I live in Georgia, and I'm not that far from Amicalola. I just went northbound was my plan to start with. And of course, as we all know, the best laid plans can go south. But I started on March the 1st and had some really good weather to begin with. And then it was really tough in the Smokies and went north and I met a lot of really nice people and hiked in and out of with several different people. Hiked with a guy and I gave him his trail name Bolt from New Hampshire, and I'm sorry, Rhode Island. And so we hiked hundreds of miles together, and um, it- really beautiful weather, and then really bad weather. It was kind of really one extreme or the other as we went, and really enjoyed the hike. But where I ran into trouble was contracted norovirus in Virginia, and it's where so many people got it, including Night Owl. We got the Noro badge, which we didn't want it, but we got it. They say you're not a true through hiker till you get it, so I've got the badge. But I got it coming into Delville, um, passing the Tinker Cliffs and McAfee Knob and Dragon's Teeth in those areas, and which so many people were getting there, and God bless me to be at it was the Spark Hotel as you come into Delville when I was starting to get it. And so I was able to get into a hotel, I was so thankful. And Night Owl she had gotten there before me and was getting better before I did. And she would put little snacks and stuff and some medicine and stuff outside my door and I'd grab it. So she was so kind and I enjoyed hiking with her so much. He got norovirus behind me and then he was dazed. And so we got separated and we never got to hike again after that because we got so far apart. And then we continued north. But I found a tick. And of course, you had tick bites and you'd always try to look, but it was on my left hip and I didn't see it. And I was, I didn't know if you're hiking so many miles a day. I was in the 20s and you're so exhausted, you just lay down and crash out and then get up and go again. And I started going downhill, and I think that's why I fell in Pennsylvania. And I fell the nice edge up in that area that's so horribly rough with all the rocks, and we thought it would never end. I started hiking with another hiker that's from Maine named Boulder, and so we were stuck together for a long time for hundreds of miles. But at any rate, I was getting weaker and weaker. I started feeling worse and worse, and then I think that's one of the reasons why I fell was because I wasn't really picking my feet up and all those rocks and they were slick and I just got off balance with the pack, and down I went and hard. And I've got a scar on my right leg, and I cut my head, and and I was blooded all over and where I fell. But the biggest thing was my spine is fused with titanium screws and rods, and I have a plastic disc in my lower back. I had a tree fall and hit me in the side of the head, a stand tree in the shoulder. And in 2010, that happened to me. And my name wouldn't be Preacher without sharing the best part of that story was um, I had surgery when I had the surgery, and then I was going through all kinds of procedures and nerve damage and chronic pain since 2010. And in 2024, January the 2nd, I can tell you the day, uh, God just said, don't take the pain medication anymore and go through these surgeries anymore, but and procedures because your pain's going to be gone. And it was. And so I got my miracle. God had me start walking, and I'd walk in the morning, rest in the middle of the day, and walk in the evening. And I lost 105 pounds in 9 months. Um,
Wow, that's amazing.
I lost the whole person. So I would cry and pray and say, God, why are you making me do all this walking? And I had a friend that's a Christian, and he said, hey, why don't you go do the AT? And I said, yes, I'm walking, but my spine is still fused. I couldn't carry a pack. And so God just had to implant that seed, and it just began to grow. And I started looking at packs. And so I bought an Osprey, the Atmos, and started looking at the sites on YouTube to get all the equipment. And Taylor, the New Hampshire hiker, she's the one that I used the most of, and got the best. I just thought her advice was really great, and I use a lot of the same stuff that she used. So I call her Tay Tay, but at any rate, I never got to tell that in person, but that was just my nickname for her. But at any rate, so I loaded my stuff up a piece at a time until it was fully loaded, my pack. And so I started walking again with my pack, and as I waited till I got to full food and everything and no pain. So God blessed me with a miracle. And so God just spoke to my heart and said, you go on the trail and tell people what I did in your life and the miracle that that you got. And so that's what I did. And so I started out calling my name, my grandfather's name, who's passed away, is Coy, C-O-Y. So I started using his name. Well, about 2 days in, Boulder from Maine, I met him right off. He started calling me preacher, and so it just stuck. So that's how I got my trail name. But at any rate, as far as me falling, I tried to hang on. I just cried and prayed to God, I don't want to quit. And so I drug myself along for a couple of days, all bloodied up, and then I just couldn't carry my pack anymore. And so I got on Amtrak and came home from Philadelphia, and it comes right to North Georgia here where I'm from. And so about 2.5 months later, I just about gave up. I said, God, I guess you're not going to send me back. I was better. So I flew to Bangor, Maine, and Shaw's Hostel picked me up at the airport. So I stayed with them, did the 100-mile wilderness north, did the summit, and then I came down the A-Ball Trail, and they showed me back to Shaw's. And then I started south, so they call that a flip flop. So I didn't know I was flipping and flopping, but I was. So I started south and got through the mountains, and it was in October when I came across the Bigelow Mountains, and I about got hypothermia up there. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in 2 hours. I really wasn't. I still had some warm stuff, but not like I did. Anyway, long story short, I got off in Stratton, Maine, and I was running short of time, and I could see the writing on the wall, and I prayed about it. So anyway, I came home. So now I'm praying about either starting over or finishing what I have left. I feel like God's kind of pointing me in the direction to start over, which we've had a pretty deep conversation about, to have to
Mhm.
give up all those miles and start again. But if that's
Yeah,
what he wants me to do, that's what I'll do.
that's amazing, and I remember that, knife's edge in Pennsylvania because I had heard a little bit about it, but it was tough, it was scary. I remember, my pack was pretty heavy the day I went over that area, and, I was like, "Man, if you fall here, you're in big trouble." And, it was very narrow and very, very difficult.
I lost 6 toenails on the trail, and you have to put your feet between the rocks, and they will slide in there and bang, and hit. And um, Yeah, that place is tough. It's so mentally, not just physical, but because you have to look where every footsteps goes. It's not like open trail where you can just have your head up and look around. You got to be looking and prepared all the time.
Yeah, and
But
I
I
was
crossed Lee.
alone, and I was alone through that whole area, and I, being from the Northeast, I wasn't used to hiking in areas with, venomous snakes, with rattlesnakes. And so I was going through there. It was a warm day. It was midday, I think, and I was also worried about running into rattlesnakes in that whole area.
Yes, and that's I walked by several rattlesnakes that I never saw up in those areas. You would just hear them rattling. And you got to the point where wasn't a good thing because you got so used to hearing 'em, you about jump out of your skin when you at first, and then you'd hear them and you just really couldn't see them, just like, "God, just keep on going." You just kinda didn't really pay much attention anymore. You kinda got used to it, but yes, that was a tough area. And as far as the 2026 hike, whatever God sends me to do in that, I did go and register my hike because I'm close. And I went on New Year's Day and I got there at 5:03 and they closed at 5 and the lady was inside. She wouldn't open the door. So I came back on the 4th and I'm number 21 this year. I was number 87 last year and I have not seen the tags. I asked and somebody was saying they were super dark green, almost black. Now I've not seen them. They didn't have them to give out yet.
Yeah, I haven't even looked into that to see what they are.
They
Um,
said that there was a guy there at 1:30 in the morning on New Year's Day that camped out on the steps in front of the store, all night waiting for it to get so he could get number 1. So
yeah. What kind of symptoms did you have from the Lyme disease? And did you have to get off trail and get the antibiotics?
well, that's when I got Lyme, I didn't know I had Lyme yet, and that's why I felt like I was going downhill, and part of my fall was I was just weak and pushing myself really hard. I didn't know till I got home because I got on Amtrak and came home and I just began to still go downhill, just like a low grade fever and joints. You just ached and you're already hurting normally from hiking and it just was magnified. And then it's like a low grade fever. You just feel terrible. You don't feel good and you hurt. So, I went to the doctor and I was on doxycycline and, I was blessed to be better from the doxycycline. And unfortunately, some people, from what I've heard, if you wait too long, you get chronic symptoms that you can't really ever get rid of.
Yeah, yeah. I had similar symptoms when I contracted Lyme disease. Probably up. I either picked a tick up in Connecticut or Massachusetts, but I picked up on the symptoms. I was pretty worn out at that point by the time I got to Massachusetts as well. And my wife Compass is a nurse practitioner, and she works in the oncology field, but she's very knowledgeable. And she looked me over and she found a bite, and again, it was, on the back of my calf, right around the sock, just below the sock line. And so I never actually found the tick, but there was a little bullseye rash there. And, I said, I gotta go get the doxycycline," and that kept me off trail for at least 3, 4, or 5 days longer while I was here in Massachusetts. Um, but then I was just driven to get back on trail, but I just took it a little easy, and, eventually I started feeling myself again. Now, similarly to me, you're also retired law enforcement. You're a retired game warden, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And when I was in, my dad was an airline pilot, and when I was in college, I got my fixed wing license, and they would attach me with the governor's drug task force, and as a ground crew leader because we had 4-wheel drive vehicles, and they would give us a Kawasaki mule on the trailer, and we would do outdoor marijuana interdiction here in Georgia. And they started putting me in the helicopter because I have good eyesight and I was already a pilot. They had people putting in there with the pilot as observers, and the doors would be off and you flying, 50, 100 feet high, and they would get sick. And so they started throwing me in the helicopter, and I was already a pilot and I just fell in love with it. I ended up buying my own helicopter, and I used to when you'd hike through near Sassafras Mountain in that area, the Army Ranger camp is near. Then there's an airport called Wimpy Mill Airport near there, and that's where I hangared my um, helicopter. And a lot of people get ideas that I'm some kind of rich person having a helicopter. What I had was a piston engine, not a turbine, which is much cheaper. And mine was a TH-55, which was a military trainer. It was the primary Army training helicopter for about 15 years. And mine was a 1968 model. Really great safety rating and really good aircraft, solid as rock. So God blessed me to have that, and I built time in it and did my private and commercial license. And so then they later started attaching me with the task force, and they would let me fly. So that's how I got into to flying, which I still love. And after I was injured, I wasn't able to fly anymore, and I dearly miss it. And especially when you get to burn other people's fuel and then fly their aircraft. So at any rate, I started flying again. God bless him, do that. So I went and got my flight medical after I got injured between going back to the trail and doing the summit at Katahdin. I did go back and get my medical, flight medical, and I started flying some again. And so I'm just asking God to guide me where to go and what to do, whatever He wants me to do. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. How much?
Almost 20 years.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
After I got injured, I was put out on disability retirement, which, um, it was tough. And, I had a really big identity, and God really humbled me in that because my identity was so much in that profession, as you know, in your profession, the way it was. And it's just part of your identity and who you really are. And so God was teaching me to be humble. And that was a tough lesson too. It's, really hard to leave doing that, and I loved it so much. And grew up hunting and fishing, and always wanted to be a game warden. And God blessed me to live that dream, and then to fly, and He blessed with that dream. And so then when you lose your health and all those things, it's tough.
Yeah, I can understand that. Your health is everything, life, everything else in life doesn't matter if you're chronically ill or injured, that's priority number one to try and recover from that. And I know your spirituality has been an important part of your life. Has it always been, or did you become more religious as you got older in your
Well, I accepted Jesus Christ when I was 12. And so, as far as I can remember, it was, from a very young age, yes. And, I told people, and not in a forceful way along the trail. God says, tell people, the sacrifice that my son Jesus Christ made for the world. And of course, it's a free gift for us to receive. We've been bought and paid for with a price. God sent His Son Jesus to die on the cross for us, and for our sins, past, present, and future. But it's a free gift, and you have to receive it. If I try to give you something and you don't take it, it's not a gift. You have to accept it. So that was one of the things that really helped me on the trail too. Was yeah, some of the Psalms that I would draw strength on, and I say a lot of the really rough days, God carried me up the mountain, and the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delights in His way. That's Psalm 37:24, and I would say, God order my steps, and then I'm armed by God with strength, and He makes my way perfect. And so there's days, as you know, you smile all day long, and then there was days I would cry all day long. This and my family, and that's one of the things, as far as people that are watching this that have not done, the trail or any, that's attempted through hike is, just know that you're going to be tested. There's going to be days where it's all flowers. There's going to be days where you're in the pits, brother and sister.
Yeah, and I was definitely there. And the word that came to mind to me while I was hiking was, I said, this is like a pilgrimage. And it's physically demanding. Um, it's the process of doing the through hike over reaching Katahdin. It's everything that you learn about yourself, and learn about the experience along that journey from where you start, to Katahdin, or if you end in Springer. And it's about community, the shared experiences, which I think is something that all religions have in common. It's kind of a pilgrimage. And even if you're not religious, I think that most Appalachian Trail through hikers they experience some sort of connection to, or at least an understanding of their higher self during a through hike, through either prayer, meditation. I think that most through hikers will experience that or have experienced that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Jesus went into the wilderness, and he would go up on the mountain to pray, and God will speak to your heart when you're on the trail. We are so inundated with technology and filling our lives with so many things. And when you get out there and it's still and quiet and hard, in the freezing rain and snow and the wind and lightning storms and having Jesus to trust. I was never afraid because the God was with me, and a lot of people would say, "Did you just do it? Take off on that trail by yourself?" And I said, no other person was with me as far as they didn't start with me that I knew anybody that went with us. I'm going with you. But I said, God's always with you. And we were hiking through a thunderstorm coming into Harper's Ferry, and it was worse than you can absolutely imagine. 30, 40, 50-mile-an-hour winds, lightning was popping all around us, man. It was Boulder from Maine. And he was scared to death. And he said, "Dude, are you not scared?" And I said, "No." I said, "Jesus is with me." I said, "If nothing's going to happen without him, his permission, and he knows everything." And I said, "If he takes me home with a bolt of lightning, what Paul says, that wrote most of the New Testament, absent in the body, present with the Lord. So I'll go to a place that's unimaginably wonderful." So I never worried about that. He said, "Man, you've really got some faith," because it was some kind of tough. And you may remember coming into um, Harper's Ferry, the trail went under a bridge. The
Yes.
overpass was overhead, and we got there, and it was like buckets of water that were coming off the places for the bridge there. But we got there, and there was a lot of pigeon poop there, but we didn't mind being in the pigeon poop because we got under that bridge. So, but yes. I have a neighbor whose son did the trail years ago and wrote a book, and he was telling me about it. I looked it up, and on the cover it had the name of the book, and it said under it, it says, "If you walk too slow, your mind will catch you." Well, let me tell you, you can't walk fast enough on that trail for your mind not to catch you. You get to reflect on every part of your life and what's been and what's to come.
Yeah, I agree. And I enjoyed the disconnect from the news and from social media. I mean, the only time I vlogged, I YouTube my whole hike. So I, I had that, which I personally, it's a creative outlet for me. I enjoy shooting video and nature and, capturing all the different things along the way on the trail, animals and flowers and insects. And I really like the waterfalls and the brooks. Even just a simple brook running by would grab my attention. And but you don't have that distraction that we have in our everyday life when you're off trail. And so I did have a lot of those internal conversations along the way, and you learn a lot about yourself and what you're capable of doing too. You're pushing through.
Yes, I don't know if you went through it, but of course, I got to go through it twice because I came off. And you just feel like you've got unfinished business, and I still do. And it was so hard for me to come off the trail when I was injured. And then you go through a depression, kind of. I'm sure it's worse. It was worse for me because I didn't get to finish and have that closure. But even people that finished like you come off and you just know what you're supposed to do every day, and you just do it. And then once all of a sudden that's gone, it's just kind of like you look around and like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah,
I was,
I definitely, when I finished the trail, every month that's gone by since I've been off the trail, I feel like I reflect and I learn more about the experience and how it's impacted me in a positive way. When I first got off trail, I was like, I don't feel any different. I feel really satisfied. I feel proud of myself for having made it, 2,200 miles. But I think initially when I was hiking the trail, I thought that when I finished it and summited Katahdin, there was going to be like an epiphany or some kind of, you know, big, big, big bright ideas in my mind. And what I'm finding again is that over the months since I've finished, I've understood more and more about the lessons that I learned on the trail. And what was your hiking style? Because I remember you were an early riser, and I remember I ran into you one day and I said, "What time do you push off?" And you said, Jesus, when I wake up, Jesus tells me to get going or something like that. What was your hiking routine like?
Yes, people would rib me a lot about that because I'd say when God says go, I go. When He says stop, I stop. And apparently, He told me to go early a lot. So because I would be up a couple of hours a lot of times before daylight. Well, all these young people would, pass me in the early afternoon or, later in the afternoon. They'd sleep in and they were way faster than I. But the way I was able to keep up with those younger people was starting earlier. But I just wake up and boom, I'm ready to go. I sent my stove home after like a month and a half. I never used it one time. And I'm one of those grab and eat people. I didn't want to take the time in the morning. I wanted to go. I was like a racehorse, waiting for the gate to open. I was gone, and I'd hike in the dark, which there was so many advantages to that. Of course, there's disadvantages too, but you get to be out there when it's just starting to crack light, and and then in the spring the turkeys would I could get to hear them gobble right at daylight, and be gone. There's not hardly anybody on the trail, and another advantage to that, and I slept in shelters a whole lot more as I progressed. I started out more tenting, but I didn't want to fool with having to pack up a tent. I would just, I could roll up my pad and my bag and stick it in, and I'd grab a Pop Tart or whatever, and I'd drink a liter of water, and I'd take off and I would go. And people would say, "Man, you're like a ghost. You were here, and then we never see you in the mornings." I'm
Yeah,
like,
you
"Yeah,
you
I'm like,
definitely were like that because I remember asking people about you because I would have loved to have spent a little bit of time with you on trail hiking. Um, and I remember having a conversation with you about, and you told me that you don't hike fast. You just get an early start and you hike all day. So you hike at probably, how many hours do you think you hiked on average per day?
probably 10 or 12." And as I got more and more fit and streamlined and lightened up my pack, I would do more miles. And the biggest mileage day that I had was Boulder and I were at Deer Lick Shelter in Pennsylvania, and there was a terrible flooding rainstorm that was coming. Well, he told me he didn't go as early as I did, but he said, when you get up and go in the morning, he said, I want you to wake me up. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes. Well, I was up at 3, and so I woke him up, and at 3:30 we were hiking. And so we were planning on coming into the last shelter before you come into the Furnace Masters there, the halfway point, and stay at the old hostel that was built in 1829, which is cool, and get to eat the hiker burger and all the cool stuff and be past the halfway point. So we had covered so many miles early in the morning, and he looked over and grinned at me and he said, we can make it the whole way. And it was 34.7 miles. And I said, okay, let's do it. So we were going to hike in the rain from the last shelter there, 15 miles in the pouring rain. Well, we made it, but it was a 16-hour day. It about killed us, but we were so happy there. And it flooded and rained the next day. We took a zero. We were able to go and resupply at the Walmart. And there was a guy standing there and with another guy, and they were hiking. Well, it was because of rain. He said, we'll take you. And there was a guy wanted $120. We called a shovel to shuttle us there and back to Walmart. So his shoes were falling to pieces. So we got some new Ultras and we got Walmart. So we got the hiker burger there, and we just had a great time being at the halfway point, and moved on from there.
Did you do any cold soaking?
I really looked into that, and then again, I would just rather buy Pop Tarts and honey buns and all kinds of stuff that I can just grab and eat. One of the biggest things that I did, I would buy a jar, and I'm old school, and all the young kids would laugh about it. I buy a jar of peanut butter and jelly and a loaf of bread, and I'd make about 8 or 10 sandwiches when I would resupply somewhere.
Mhm.
And they laughed about it until about day 2. And I was still eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And they'd see me, some of them, they got, dude, where'd you get that sandwich? And I would pile on the peanut butter and jelly, just be oozing out of them. And at any rate, and pizza, if I hiked into a hostel or somewhere where I could get a pizza, I'd get one to eat for me. And then I'd buy an extra one, let it cool, and put it in a Ziploc bag, and then fold them over on themselves like a sandwich. And again, a couple days in, 2 or 3 days in, I'd still be eating on pizza. And I'd eat that first because it was so heavy. And people say, "Dude, where'd you get that pizza?" I said, "I give you $20 for a piece of that pizza." I
Eh,
said, "Man, I wouldn't take $100 for this pizza out here in this wilderness."
I never thought to do the pizza idea until, I never did it, but I saw somebody do it. Um, I think we were at what's that ATC, castle-like building that you can stay in? I think it's in New York.
See, I
Um,
didn't get that far.
oh, okay, that's right.
I got
But
pizza
there
waiting in my door.
they had a deal where, you know, you could stay for a flat fee, you could stay there, you get a free pizza, you get a free pint of Ben& and Jerry's, and, in the morning, there was a guy in the
That
kitchen.
was the Bears Den. That was the
The
I did
Bears
see that.
Den.
That was
Yeah.
$40 and you got the bunk. And if you wanted to do the $40 deal, you got a whole frozen pizza with it and a drink.
Yes. And so he
Yes,
was up.
full place. Yes,
I love that in the morning, you made your own breakfast there. And, I like to get up early, not quite 3 a.m., but sometimes I did. But he was making his pizza in the morning and letting it cool, and he folded it up and took it on trail. And he was a section hiker. But I said, wow, that's a great idea. And then someone said, because I didn't eat my pint of ice cream the night before. So someone said, pack it out. And, later this morning or early afternoon, it'll be like a milkshake because the Ben and Jerry's are sealed pretty good. You don't have to worry about it leaking too much. But I put it on the outside of my pack in a pouch, and that's exactly what I did. I got like, I don't know, 1,200 calories. I sat there and drank that, later that day. Um, so that's one thing I would do differently is I'd pack more town food out, as you call it. When I was in town, yeah, I should have like gone to a restaurant, that night before I was leaving the next day and gotten a meal and then gotten a meal to go and packed that out. I didn't do that.
yes. Like I say, I did that a lot. You learn what works and you tweak and where your equipment's at, and that'd be one of the biggest things that I could tell people before they go on the trail. And there was people that showed up. I remember early on, they had new packs and all this equipment. They had never even used it, and I was blessed to, get my stuff early and I hiked with my full pack. And so you get that weight on your body and then you see what works, where there's problems. And of course, we all started out, even the ones with the best intentions, of looking, hiking with all your stuff and with too much stuff. And the hiker boxes that were in the hostels early on in the trail were so overflowed with good stuff. And Boulder was able to get a see the summit shower, and we used that thing. It was so awesome, and it was in one of the hiker boxes, and it was super lightweight. It was just like a rubbery plastic bag with a rope that you'd hang a rope from it, and then it had a little nozzle on the bottom that would close, and you'd open it up, and it would sprinkle water out. And we got the stank on us pretty bad, so having the shower to get under, man, it was so nice.
Did you end up losing a lot of weight overall?
Well, I had lost 105 pounds before I started, but I did slim down. I think I probably lost 20 something pounds on top of that, and lean down and I'm trying to be careful and not pork back up before I try to go on the trail. You want to keep eating like you did. You're not burning as many calories, but I did do 20 miles yesterday. I did 18 the day before. So I'm really still turning some big miles, usually about 80 a week, sometimes up to 100. And I have been up 4 times to look for the missing hiker on Blood Mountain. I can be there in about 45 minutes to the Byron Reese, the Blue Trail that leads up just over Neil Gap. And so I have been up to look for him. And me being, I used to do search and rescue stuff with DNR being a game warden. And I met his daughter on day 4. I went up the first time, and the helicopter was up, and they had probably 100 people. They had military folks up there and volunteers from North Georgia College and Dahlonega there close. He's from Gainesville, where I live, Mr. Hush, Charles Hush, and Um, they're a prominent family here. There's a Hush building downtown Gainesville named after their family, and they used to own the Citizens Bank here when I was young. And I've got a neighbor that went to high school with him, and it's just a very sad thing, and it's a mystery, and really hard to know where he's at now.
How long has he been missing? It's been before Christmas, correct?
Oh, it's been back in the fall. It's been
Yeah.
like 2.5 months now. It's a long time. He was 67 years old. And his vehicle was at the Byron Reese. And people saw him going up toward the summit of Blood and then coming down. And he was a scout when he was young, and he's hiked it in the past. He was a professor, law professor. He's an attorney at Southern Methodist University in Texas. And he came home to visit and wanted to go up and hike the trail. And it was still very warm here. It was 68 degrees here yesterday. Now, we've had some 20s, 20 degrees, and that's odd for this time of the year. But yeah, it's been really warm. So the bears were still out then, and I used to do a lot of bear trapping when I was a young game warden, and there's dens all over the south. It's rocky face and rock crag, boulders, and those bears have dens in those areas. And he could have been dragged in a den. It's hard to know where he's at. And, only God knows right now, unless there was some sort of foul play. If that was involved, they'd know. But from what it looks like, there's no foul play that I have seen from the evidence. Of course, I don't have all the evidence. It's just a mystery. But I went over the top and came around the Freeman Trail, which, if you go south and the Woods Hole it's Woods Hole Shelter, not the hostel, but in
Yes.
Georgia, is not far after you go south over over the summit and go down a couple miles. And then the Freeman Trail comes down the south slope and comes back into the trail toward Neil Gap. And so I went that way because it's poorly marked and extremely rough, but there's mountain laurel and rhododendron and boulders everywhere, and it's so rough and craggly. And they had the helicopter up all day when I was up there, but I did see, because my connection was with the search guys, they had put GPS tracking units on all the people on the ground, and so they could see in the map on the GPS where they had looked and they hadn't, and the lines just go all over each other. They had just been, so many places around that mountain.
Have they tried using the cadaver dogs or anything like that?
Yes, they were up there on day 4 when I was up there. Um, and not to get too deep into gory stuff as far as all that, but as far as the cadaver dogs, that if he was drug up into a bear den that's underground, there's not going to be a lot of scent coming out. And I don't know that that's what's happened. He could have had a stroke or a heart attack. And, sometimes, especially if people, have a stroke or something, their body's functioning, but their mind's not functioning correctly. They can just wander, and they may wander for miles before they fall out. And that might be what happened to him. I have no idea. But
Well,
it's a mystery. It needs
hopefully
to be solved. His
hopefully the
dog,
mystery is solved and the family has some closure.
yes, yes. His daughter was up there on day 4 at the trailhead as I went up the mountain, and she was handing out flyers, and she had tears in her eyes. She said, "This is my dad," and she said, "We just want to find him." And I said, "Well, I'm a retired game warden," and I said, "I'm going to go off and I did some bushwhacking where I left the AT and went down the mountain off trail through some rough areas. I was up there on Christmas Day. I was up there on let's see, Thanksgiving Day also. So, and then I did another hike up there. So I've been up 4 times, but I didn't see any sign of him, and obviously nobody else has.
Yeah. It's sad, and again, hopefully the family, has some closure, and is there a lot of hunting on the mountain up there? You would have thought during hunting season, maybe somebody might have.
You can hunt. There's not a ton of hunting up there because hunters want to be away from the people because they don't want them scaring the game away. But there is some hunting up there. And when I came through there northbound, and you saw it too, I'm sure, when you came by the Woods Hole shelter in that area, there's a gap right there before you start to climb up to the summit of Blood coming north. All the hog sign that was there, if you remember, they had torn the woods, all the pieces up there. And I think it gets more hog hunters up there in some of those areas. And there are some that deer and bear hunt, but it's an awful tough area. If you do get game, it's hard to get up there and to get game off the mountain too from up in that area.
With all your experience, working, with, bears and hogs and stuff like that, of course, we don't have any hogs up this way, but what advice would you have for AT hikers if they encounter bears or hogs? How should they be acting? What should they do or not do?
The hogs are primarily nocturnal. And bears, tend to be primarily nocturnal. And saying that, I saw 6 bears on the trail. I don't know how many you saw, but the ones that I saw were in the middle of the day. I never saw any at night. Uh, they were in the middle of the day, but you don't want to run away. They kind of get that prey instinct. That if you run away, you want to stand your ground. If there's somewhere that you can get behind or something that gives you an advantage, do that. And what I would do, and a lot of times, like I say, when I was talking about leaving out in the dark, a lot of times I was hiking an hour or two before it even started getting light, and I had a light on, and I would take my poles and clack them together, ting ting, every so often, ting ting, just to make a noise. And then when I got into some areas where I'd seen a lot more bears in Virginia, as I go and go whoop, I do just go whoop
Yeah.
like that, just let it be known that I'm coming. The biggest thing is you don't want to surprise a bear, especially if they have cubs. I saw a bear coming in a few miles come before I got into Daleville, and you may remember there's a beautiful lake. You were on a ridge top and down to the right hand side at the bottom of the mountain, and it was kind of a river channel that got deeper as it went, where it was dammed, and there was a giant rock that was at an angle, and I heard something coming up the mountain, and it was making a lot of noise in the leaves. And I said, that sounds too big to be a deer. So I just got really still, and it came on up the mountain. And when it saw me, I always wore bright colors. It just stopped and froze. And I said, hey, bear. And I did film it because I got my camera out because I could hear it coming up the mountain, and it just took off, and tore down the mountain, which is what you want 'em to do when they lose. When you holler at them and they just look at you like, you don't know me like that, dude. I'm the OG around here, not you. That's when
Yeah.
you start to worry. Um,
Yeah,
but
I ran the only bears I saw 2 cubs. They're probably a year, maybe just over a year, year and a half old, in Virginia, and I was on the trail, and they were on the left side of the trail, and they ran, maybe 30 yards in front of me. They ran from my left to my right, and, so I stopped, and then I said, "Oh, that's cool," and, I'm like, "Oh, where's the mother?" I'm like, "Where's your mother?" I just started saying that out loud. "Where's your mom? Where's your mom?" And, I just backed off. They stopped after they ran a little bit. They stopped and looked at me, and then they kinda just kept running. But I never saw her. I just waited about 10 minutes and talked out loud, and I think I even put a little bit of music on my phone or something, and then I just walked through the area. But those were the only 2 bears I saw. I saw a lot of deer, and I saw a couple moose, one on trail up in Maine. But I didn't see a ton of wildlife. Saw some turkeys, but mostly I saw deer, from Georgia to Maine. Saw a lot of deer.
One of the things that I'm technologically delayed, but that I thought would really work well for if it ran into a bear issue, is bears are they are really afraid of dogs. They do not like dogs. They'll chase them and bay them, and if you could put a recording on your phone of a dog pack going crazy, and you play that if there's a bear that's a problem, they do not want to be around dogs. Um,
Yeah, see
uh,
where you are, you can. I deer hunt, but I used to turkey hunt. To be honest with you, I got away from turkey hunting because of the ticks. The ticks are so bad up here in Massachusetts. And in the springtime, when you're turkey hunting, you're sitting at the base of a tree on the edge of a field, or just sitting on the ground. And I just didn't want to deal with ticks, and it kind of ruined it for me for spring turkey hunting up here. But I still do a little bit of deer hunting. I never hunted bears, but you can't use dogs up here to hunt bears, so they're not as fearful of dogs up here. I live in a rural part of Western Massachusetts. I live in a small city, about 45,000 residents. And there's farms around us. And, there's woods not far from me. I have bears in my yard every spring. They're doing their garbage checks. They have their whole routine that they come by every spring, and they've gotten our garbage a couple times, so they keep coming back. And when I was an officer working for, the city, we would commonly get complaints about, black bears being in the middle of the neighborhoods in the middle of the day. And I mean, sometimes it's funny. I remember this one day we had a bear, and he was just kind of going through the backyards, and it was a really hot day in August, and he ended up climbing up and getting into a above ground swimming pool. He was in the pool cooling off. Then when they get to be a problem bear up here, we don't, or we call them environmental police officers up this way. And, there's very few of them. There's very few of them that cover the entire state. I think we probably only have 3 for all of Western Massachusetts, but, they'll come out and dart them and put them asleep and then try to relocate them somewhere. So I have a lot of experience encountering black bears, but it's much different when you're on trail and you're alone in Virginia, and you see one coming towards you, or you hear one. But I think, like you said, they don't want anything to do with people for the most part. They just turn and run.
Yes, they're just big eating machines, and they're just like we are. If we find something good to eat somewhere, we're going to be back. And
Yeah,
they have to work hard to scratch out a living, And so if they get into trash cans, man, they're going to be there.
yeah. What kind of advice do you have? I know we've probably given a lot of advice, but what other advice would you have for the Appalachian Trail class of 2026 that's out there now or starting in the next couple months?
Oh, again, the equipment, I can just tell you, you're going to streamline down. And I would look at, I like Taylor and the Hampshire Hiker a lot. And there's lots of sites of people that have actually done the trail and know what they're talking about. And we need so much less than what we think we need. And I used to be a fat boy. One of my biggest things I was telling you was food. And I would have food in the bottom of my bag that I would eat the food down to and never get to. And then I would say, you know what, I'm going to do better next time when I resupply. And most of the time I did not. And I would pile the food back up on it and eat down to a certain point. And I got a little better about it, but I was always afraid if I got stuck out there, I said, man, I don't want to go hungry. And you burn so many calories, as you know, a day. Um, and you got to do what works for you. There was people that would fight you for their stove. I sent mine home and never used it. They loved having ramen noodles and, doing the ramen bomb and putting the instant potatoes. And, they all had their favorite things. And the dehydrated meals, they're much lighter. And I did carry one of my staple things was the Jack Link's teriyaki, the steak bites, the tender bites, and
Mhm.
those were lightweight. And I would do a grab goodie bag of wheat thins and Triscuits, and I would sprinkle cashews in there and M&Ms and M's and all that kind of stuff, and fill that thing up like a half gallon bag, I guess it was. And I would eat that with my steak bites and the tuna and the tortillas, and I had the mayonnaise packets. I'd eat those. I enjoyed that high protein. You want the biggest bang that you can get as far as the food goes in the weight, that's always kind of a trade off. But like I say, I was old school as far as carrying some heavier stuff, and I would eat it first, but high calorie stuff. But pizza and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Another thing I would get was, at Walmart or Dollar General was those honey buns. I like the ones that had the
Yeah,
chocolate drizzled on them that had the cream inside. They were like 850 calories.
yeah,
So I'd eat the snot out of those things. I enjoyed all that stuff. But everybody's got to do what works for them. I love sardines. But you couldn't carry those everywhere because that's like, bringing in bears like,
yeah,
flowers to bees. And so I would kind of plan those out when I would get those. And anyway, and I always eat the heavy stuff early to get it gone. But where I could see on the trail that there was going to be somewhere I could eat lunch where there was a stream water, I would eat and wash those cans out and stomp them flat and then put them in my trash bag. So you didn't have all that stink on the scent. But
yeah.
use your equipment, get it out, wear it, see what works for you. Get your stove out if you're going to carry a stove and cook on it. See what works. Everybody, some people, the things that you see that they love, you hate. Everybody's different. God made every one of us different, and we all have our own path to walk that God wants us to walk. And He gave us all different spiritual strengths and personalities. That's why some people could be a doctor. I can never do that. I wouldn't want to cut on somebody. And there's other people that's what God made them to do. So we're all different. See what works for you. Get out there and make some miles, do some hikes. There was people that showed up that and some of them were successful.
Hmm.
Bolt was from Rhode Island. He just he he was carrying cans of Dinty Moore beef stew in his pack. His pack weighed 60 something pounds when we came through at Neil's Gap. And uh I enjoyed hiking around him too, because I said, man, if things go bad, you got good stuff to eat. I want to be with you. But he did finally, and he would come back with an insult really like a bolt of lightning. That's how he got his name, Bolt. I gave him his name. So he was from up north, and the people that I hiked with that were from up north, Boulder from Maine, and they would say, dude, people from up north aren't like you are, preacher. And I said, what do you mean? And it's like, man, y'all are so nice down here in the South. He said, if you're nice to people, he said, you'll see when we get up north. He said, when you're nice to them the way you are, they'll think you're trying to get over on 'em. You're doing it because you want something from them. And
I was I was I was pleasantly surprised. I had no less than two or three through hikers tell me that the nicest people they ran into were in Massachusetts. And I was like,
wow.
"Are you serious?" I mean, it's just a different part of the country, they're just a little bit more cautious, I think, once you get up north towards, Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts. But I echo your advice. I love Taylor, New Hampshire hiker. I had the opportunity. My wife and I actually met her on her second through hike. We met her at the top of Mount Greylock. I We live like probably 20 minutes from the base of Mount Greylock, and that's where I did a lot of my training for the Appalachian Trail. So yeah, we gave her some trail magic, and she's very sweet. Um, and to name a couple more, because I watched all their videos as well, is Dixie. Dixie's the OG, YouTube hiker who has inspired so many people to get out there and hike the trail. And I believe, if I remember right from her videos, I don't think she had ever spent the night in the woods before. I think she just went to the AT and experienced it, kind of like you were saying, like some people without having slept in a tent before. The other Roadrunner, I really enjoyed her this year. Uh, Hiking Dancer is her channel, Julianne. She's getting ready this year to do her Triple Crown. She starts the CDT sometime this spring. But watch these YouTubers' channels. That's what I did to prepare, and you learn the mistakes they made, and learn what works for you and what doesn't work. For me, I think it's a confidence builder too, because you see how people are doing it, and there's different ways to do it. And I mean, that's inspired me to also, vlog and YouTube my hike, was hopefully passing on those lessons to other people. I certainly made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I tried to share those when I made those. Um,
Yes, it's an incredible journey, and a lot of people get caught up in and I saw it early on, and I'm sure you probably did too. You get caught up in the adrenaline rush of telling everybody about, and I'm doing this, and you could see the light draining out of people's eyes. Like 2 days in, they were like, "Dude, I wasn't made for this," and there was people that hiked the stairs, and I want to give this advice too. The stairs at Amicalola, it's as I remember, I don't remember the exact count. I think it's in the 700s climbing the falls on, when you leave the welcome center there. Of course, that's part of the approach trail. You don't officially start, the AT until you reach Springer Mountain. That's where the first white blaze is. And there were people that left from there and hiked up those stairs on the first day and quit. there was like 3 people that, had started on, I think it was, I believe it was either March 1st or 2nd, that, the word came through the crew, that man, they did the stairs and went a mile or 2 and then just turned around. One of them went right back down to the center and said, "I'm done. I'm not going any farther." But you don't have to do those stairs. It's beautiful, but I would suggest this, and I think they should do more of that at the Welcome Center. You can get somebody to take your pack up to the top where the lodge is, and you don't have to do the stairs with your pack if you want to do stairs, and or leave your pack down at the bottom and then get a ride with your pack up the top so you don't have to separate from your pack. But it is very tough to get to Springer Mountain parking area, which is a mile north of where you start at Springer Mountain. And Kaleidoscope, I met him at Shaw's, and he had gone, did the summit and was going, no, I'm sorry. He went north up to around Harper's Ferry and then went up, did the 100-mile wilderness, and then came back to Shaw's summit and back to Shaw's and then was going south. And so when he got a couple of months ago, when he got to almost to the finish, I had his phone number. So I went down and grabbed him, and I call it Trail Blessings. I went to Walmart there here near my house, and I know the way up there. So I shot up there, but it was 40 miles, and there's 20 miles of that this dirt road probably. And it's hard to get up the mountain. Line of stair gap, you go up, if it's wet, you pretty much got to have 4-wheel drive to get up there. So it's hard to get a shuttle. That was my point, and I'm a talker. To get to the main point was, if you come in on Amtrak or fly into Atlanta and you want to go to Springer Mountain, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be expensive a lot of times to get to Amicalola to the Welcome Center and do the approach trail. It's much easier to get a ride to there because it's paved roads all the way. But it's 7 or 8 miles or something like that on the approach to get to the beginning of the trail. But it's hard to get somebody to give you a ride up there to the top at Spring. And there's a parking area, like I say, it's about a mile north. So you have to go backwards south to get there to the Springer Mountain and then come back again and start north. But I would look at the stairs, and what's going on there. You do, back to the original point, you do not have to do the stairs. You can start up at the lodge and avoid the stairs and go on. But so many people are so heavy, they've got too much stuff. And again, there's a lot of people that aren't training. And let me tell you, 2,200 miles is no joke through the mountains. And a lot of people think it's a groomed trail. And I would show pictures of the trail and the boulders and hands and knees, and my legs were bloody in pictures. And they were like, "Dude, I didn't know the trail was like that." Look at YouTube, people, and see the equipment you need and see the pictures and what the trail's like and the advice people give you. But preparation, prepare, and just know that there's going to be days when you want to quit and you're going to cry all day long, and there's going to be other days where you're going to say, "Man, I can't believe I'm up here," and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Push through those days that you just
y-
described too. I mean,
yes,
be mentally strong and push through those days. I had heard the same thing about the stairs, the approach trail, and I had heard from someone online. I don't know if it was in a video or just a conversation, but they said that a large number of people get injured on the approach trail before they even make it to Springer Mountain. So I didn't do the approach trail. My sister lives in North Carolina. She started the trail with my wife and I, and her husband drove us from North Carolina down to Georgia. So when we got up in the morning to start the trail, he drove us up to Springer Mountain, um, and we were able to, hike the mile up to the top of Springer Mountain, and then we started our hike, did the mile back down, and that's how we did that. And I didn't have any problems. If I do the trail again, or if I go back into that area, I'll probably just do the stairs just to do them. But you're absolutely right. You don't have to do the stairs, and if you're concerned because you haven't been hiking enough and preparing enough, it's probably not a good idea to do the stairs. I think we originally had looked into shuttles, and it was going to be expensive and difficult to get someone to shuttle us, up to do that up on Springer Mountain.
and another piece of advice I have to give, There was young people. There was a girl. I don't know if you got to meet. They ended up being a trio. It was Scorch, Chortle, and March, Death March.
I
The
did
young
meet
people.
them.
Yes, they
Yeah.
were wonderful. I love them and so
Yeah.
much fun. But she started out by herself. Just graduated high school. Now all three of them are just graduated high school, and Scorch and Chortle were high school buddies. But I saw March, and that's when I met her, was hiking into Uncle Johnny's hospital in Irwin, Tennessee. And I saw her on the side of the trail, and I could tell she was not a happy camper. And I said, "Are you okay?" And her shoes were falling apart. She said, I said, "You need to get some shoes, girl." And I said, there's an outfitter there at Uncle Johnny's, is what I heard. And there was. And she said, "Well, I've got college, I'm accepted to college in the fall, and I'm trying to save money." And I said, "You can't skimp on shoes on this trail." And that's another advice that's coming in on the same advice. It is buy decent equipment. Some of the stuff you can cheap out on, and some stuff it's better not to cheap out on. You don't have to buy the most expensive. I saw what's the lady that hiked the trail so many years ago, the first hiker, grandma. I try to remember
Grim
what her, yeah,
um,
her pack and her equipment's
Gates. Yeah.
at the halfway point in the museum, and I got to see it. It was just a little bitty pack, like some kids, less than what kids
Mm.
carry, to school today, and just some old beat up shoes. And at any rate, get the best equipment that you have. But back to my original point is, when I saw March, and she started out alone, and a young lady, just out of high school, that's 18 years old. And don't be afraid to do that. There's going to be people. She met up with March and Scorch and Chortle, and they became a trio. And she was so happy after that, and they had so much fun together. It was so wonderful to see those young people. And God's going to put people in your path that they call it your trail family, your tramily, that you jive with, and you'll be friends for the rest of your life. And just get in there and go, and don't be afraid. And again, the biggest thing is just prepare. Don't go shoot from the hip and say, "I'm going to do this thing," and not prepare. And there's people like us, like we talked about, that started out never doing anything, never trained at all, and they make it, but it is rare. You really need to be testing yourself and get ready for it. It'll be much easier. There'll be less blisters and a lot less crying, more smiling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you on the show today, and maybe we can reconnect again while you're on trail this year. I'd love to kind of add that element to this show, being able to occasionally interview through hikers as they're making their way, up or down the trail. And if you're interested, I'd love to have you back on.
Sure. And again, I'm praying that God's making me be patient, that we want him to just say, "Go here, go there, do this, do that," and not have to wait. But he's making me be patient. And so that's what I'm learning. And I'm going to be ready, no matter what he wants me to do. I call it God's boot camp. I've been in it for a long time now. So I'm going to keep going in God's boot camp. He's just preparing me for his service. And that's what I'll do, whatever he says. And so I, I may be starting a brand new through hike, depending on what he wants me to do, or finishing what I've got left, or he may run me off of all this stuff and say, "No, I want you over here." And that's when you do what God says and just say, "I'm all in, Lord. You just take the wheel." We want to keep our hand on the steering wheel and let God. We say, "God, steer the wheel," and then we want to put our hand on it and try to say, "No, I want to go over here," and God say, "No, we're going this way." So I just want to be real careful and be a Christian servant and do what God says. So at any rate, I enjoyed seeing you again. It's awesome. And again, you'll make friends on the trail, and it makes me so happy to see water slide. I remember him just as clear as day. And you'll make people, and there's people that you'll meet. And again, before I go, I'll give more piece of advice. And this is a good one. Get people's numbers, because they'll get
Yeah.
ahead and you'll get behind. You'll hike at different times. People will take a 00 somewhere. They'll get Noro like I did, or somebody else will get Noro, and you get separated, and you'll miss those people, and you don't have their contact information. And that's one of the things about the hiker yearbook. You can put your information in, and I'm excited to get people's information and contact that I have not seen since the trail. and get people's numbers and stay in touch because it's a big
That's
deal.
really good advice because it particularly comes in handy as you get further up north and you start getting into the whites and stuff. Because if you have people that are ahead of you, say they're 100 miles ahead of you or 50 miles or even more, you can kind of get a intelligence from them. You know, you can say, oh, what are the conditions like here or there? And they'll kind of warn you to stay away from, certain things. We
Yes,
did
they'll give
that.
you great advice. And another thing is, and I had a bad encounter with a hostel, and I won't say the name of it. It was in North Carolina, and came off the mountain, and this guy was waiting there, and he had his hostel name on the side of the truck, and I was wore out and tired, and I said, shoot, yeah, I'll go with you. So I jumped in with this guy, and I want you to know he drove like a maniac, and tires were squealing through the mountain curves and the hairpin turns. And I said, "Sir, can I tell you something?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "You are really scaring me with your driving." Well, that made him mad. He drove faster, and I was like, "Ooh, this is getting spicy." And I said, "Sir, would you do me a favor and take me back to the trailhead?" I said, "I'll be glad to pay you whatever I owe you." And he slammed on the brakes and turned that truck around, and it was a V8 truck, and man, it was in the wind going back. And I said, "Sir, there is no need for you to be driving like this." I said, "I just want to get safely back." And well, then he started lecturing me, and he was from up north, and he said, "You're gonna have a hard time getting to Maine. If you," he said, "everybody drives like me." And I said, "Sir, I'm walking to Maine." Well, that made him mad. So he dropped me at the trailhead. Well, then when I got out, there was a couple there, and they were trail runners. They were fast, man. I'm telling you, I didn't see them for long. But they told me, they said, "Don't go with that guy." And I said, I'd already got out of the truck, and someone had saw him. They came down the trail. Said, "Don't go with that guy." I said, "I already did it." I made him bring it back. He said, "Yeah, it's all over the far out app. Do not go with that guy. He is crazy." And I told Bolt about it. I wasn't with him at that time. We were separated during the middle of the day there. And he said, "So what you telling me is you about got murdered?" No, be careful, And I said, "Yeah."
There are some transient homeless people on the trail. Night Owl talked about a couple experiences she had. And, if you go into a shelter and you see a situation, that's a good thing to text to the other hikers that are behind you. And I think the class of 2026 is fortunate to have you out there this year. You're a wealth of information and you're just a good-hearted person, always full of positive advice. So I think they're lucky to have you. And I wish you all the best, my friend. And I hope we can reconnect while you're on trail this year. Please stay in touch.
Thanks, brother.